You turn up to work on a Monday morning, you got to give 110%, because if you don't, you're actually hurting yourself, you're hurting your employer, and you're hurting your relationship. And there have been times where I've been quite demotivated, quite upset for a few weeks at a time, even a couple of months at a time, and I've not given my 100%. And don't ignore the fact that your employer is paying for your salary. Give it 110%. In doing that, you actually become better. So if you are in a rat race kind of a job where you aren't giving that 110%, you are actually hurting yourself in a way that's not particularly obvious to you until maybe later down the road. Because if you're not giving 110%, you ain't growing as fast. If you're not growing as fast, it's you. The legacy I want to leave behind is to encourage and motivate Muslim people in particular to live their life, to not be constrained and restrained by mental frameworks which are imposed on them. You have one life, it may go at any time. Learn to live it and stop shadow boxing and caging yourself up in false prisons.
What kind of advice would you give to someone who's looking to escape the rat race, escape the 9 to 5, but they're just stuck in a rut?
Firstly,
welcome to another episode of the I Love Monday podcast. Today we have Saqib Qureshi, an entrepreneur who has developed over $100 million of real estate, an angel investor and a best-selling author. Welcome to the podcast.
thank you very much, Zaid. Good to meet you.
Likewise. Right, so who is Saqib Qureshi in a nutshell? Let's start with that.
Oh my goodness. Saqib Qureshi is somebody who is in a position of doing what he wants to do with his life. And I got there by making the break from being employed a dozen years ago, putting my foot down into real estate, driving that through and leveraging off that so that I now end up kind of doing exactly what I want to do with my life.
Which is? Anything in it?
So it's a pretty broad spectrum. I've written a third book, which is on Islam, which is published in mid-July in the UK, called Being Muslim Today. I'm a fellow at the LSE. I've invested in 25 businesses worldwide, and I developed real estate both with conventional debt and also real estate without any debt. And that's really mostly for Muslim investors. And so kind of enjoy that because the people I work with are good fun. But real estate, I wouldn't say is a passion. It's a way of generating wealth with people who I enjoy working with.
Okay, let's take you back to your childhood and upbringing. Where were you born? And how was your childhood?
Born in Edgware Hospital, northwest London, and either lived there or Stanmore for pretty much my entire life until I hit 30-something, 2 years old. I think my upbringing was really amazing. I have a litany of very, very wonderful, positive memories. I'm incredibly grateful for my parents who made the sacrifices they did in life to raise not only myself but my siblings in the way that they did. Went to an amazing private school for 11 years, reaped the benefits of that. You know what? I just can't. I mean, it was an idyllic and almost perfect childhood. Really enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
And then you studied at LSE, is that correct?
My undergrad was at the LSE, and then I spent almost like 4 odd years in investment banking, and then I came back to do a PhD at the LSE as well.
So what was your undergrad?
International relations.
What was the reason you chose that?
I just enjoyed studying the subject. I wanted to know more about it. This was in the aftermath of 1991 and the US attack on Iraq. And so politics and Muslim identity and all those bits and pieces came to the forefront, and I wanted to understand a bit more about the world. And I got deeply, kind of passionately involved, and I went to the LSE with a view to learning. And a lot of the things that I thought I knew as a kind of post A-level student, I ended up realizing I didn't really know. For one, I still remember in 1991, 92, I thought that there was this kind of global, ahistoric conspiracy by the West against Islam. And then you kind of probe beneath the bonnet of that and you realize, no, that's not quite right, actually. There might be pockets of prejudice and there's definitely a flavor of prejudice which runs across centuries, but this kind of notion that the West has its designs on destroying the Muslim world or Islam, it kind of evaporates. And so I went in eyes open, I think, and I went in challenging professors who really didn't have the time for a piddly first year undergrad, but I would just sit outside their office door and I would say, right, let's debate this one, shall we? And the more we debated, the more I realized actually I've got a lot to learn. And it's very lucky, actually. It's very lucky to have learned an awful lot there in my 3 years. But what I didn't do a vocational degree. I didn't do a subject which was designed for my career. My undergrad was purely, I want to do it, I want to learn. It might be the last time in my life that I can dedicate to learning, like in a kind of formal way. And so I'm not going to squander that. I'm not going to study something that I don't want to study for three odd years.
And then what did you do? Were you into consulting afterwards or investment banking?
Investment banking for 4 years, which was interesting. I learned a lot about financial instruments and the way financial markets operated and the different functions of an investment bank and how it all came together. But I realized my learning curve was plateauing. I didn't particularly enjoy the culture of an investment bank. I didn't particularly enjoy the long working hours. And I needed something which was a bit more intellectually stimulating. So I did a PhD in epistemology and international relations, again at the LSE. Again, that had absolutely no commercial value. I mean, there's no way you can really very hard to commercialize a PhD, particularly in that subject. I mean, I suppose you could commercialize a PhD in economics, but in epistemology, like postmodern philosophy and international relations, oh my goodness, that's probably as bad a combination as there is for a job. But I was like, yeah, you know what? I really want to learn this stuff. I want to study it. It's fascinating. I won't get, I won't get that many chances in life to tackle this kind of material. So you may as well grab it.
So, how did you get into investment banking from studying international relations?
So most of the top investment banks, and for that matter, the consulting firms as well, are agnostic on undergraduate degree. There are certain parts of an investment bank that want a quantitative background, but most parts of an investment bank are agnostic around. Well, at least back then were agnostic. I think there's a bias right now towards having people who are familiar with coding, but back then, and I think this is still generally true of the consulting firms, they're kind of agnostic about your undergrad degree. I think what they really look for is the ability to learn and that drive and passion and that commitment to excellence, and all of that can be crystallized by studying almost anything at a top tier university. And that certainly was the case then. So I knew that for sure when I did my undergrad. Like I had already had a few conversations with people in investment banks, and they just said, look, you go to the LSE, it doesn't really matter what subject you study, just do a reasonable job of it and you'll be attractive to the job market.
What was it about international relations or politics that really interested you, that you wanted to learn more?
So the drive, the kind of fuel to the fire, I think, was the Gulf War, like I say. I mean, this kind of real heavy notion that the West is against Islam. And I wanted to understand that, and I wanted to make sense of it. And very quickly I realized it's actually quite a bankrupt idea. If the West was against Islam, the Muslim world would have long been wiped out, and there wouldn't be Muslims in the UK either. British Muslims have been around for centuries, not just 50 years, but we've been here for centuries. And our footprint or our fingerprints are found in aspects of British society and life which most Muslims aren't even aware of. I mean, you take St. Paul's Cathedral, which is one of the iconic landmarks of London, and it's fundamentally a mosque. It's a copy and paste of a mosque. The dome comes from a mosque. You look at Westminster Cathedral, the towers are all copy and paste from the minaret. The bell is basically the Christian interpretation of the muezzin. And so we've got these kind of very interesting fingerprints. And I didn't quite appreciate that when I did my undergrad degree. But I think really what I wanted to get to the bottom of was this conspiracy. And from there, I began realizing that the political lens the political lens, and one which is kind of power politics in particular, is not a sufficient basis to explain human behavior at state level. And it's very easy to see that because we as human beings, as individuals, we do not conduct our individual lives on the basis of politics or power calculations. We just don't do it.
Yeah.
So if we don't do it as individuals, then expecting a country to do it is a bit far-fetched.
Moving on to the rat race.
Mm-hmm.
So you wanted to escape the rat race, and then you put your foot down into entrepreneurship and real estate.
That's right.
So when was the light bulb moment for you that you need to get out of this rat race?
The light bulb moment, migrating from Dubai to Toronto, I took one look at the average commute time back then, which has become a lot worse. Back then it was about 50 minutes one way. Twice in a day is 140 minutes. Just, that's a lot of life to lose. And I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing that. On top of that, you're paying taxes. Half of your income in one shape or another was going to taxes. Sales tax, capital gains tax, income tax, you name it. So, dude, you know what? I've got this one life on this planet. It can go tomorrow. It can go next year. It can go in 10 years. Who knows? And this notion that I'm just going to be another nut in a massive machine working 50, 60 hours a week, only to then be able to live when I'm 65, made no sense. It made no sense to me whatsoever. I had no appetite to live the rest of my life being semi-slaved and then enjoying a bit of freedom in my retirement. Like that, makes absolutely no sense. You have one life, you have to learn to respect it. You have to really, it can go very, very fast. As do I, people who passed away very suddenly, younger than both of us. Very suddenly, They thought, like you and I do, that tomorrow is going to come and tomorrow doesn't. We don't know. And so you have to learn to respect the life that you have, because when it's gone, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone. It's no longer there. And so I realized 12, 13 years ago in the migration that I was not going to be enslaved and then essentially working for the tax man. It's like, nope, you may as well, pack up your bags. And the thing that I realized in the journey since is that what holds people back to take on that route is this fear and then an anxiety and I can't do this and what if this, and it's like if you put your mind to it, it will, it does happen. Like you put your mind to stuff, you make minor adjustments, you learn things, you have challenges, you keep at it, you learn things, you make adjustments, you pivot here, you pivot there. But if the energy and the kind of drive is there, then it all happens. And that's basically what I kind of had that gut intuitive sense that if I kept at it, I'll figure it out. Like I was like, yeah, if I keep at it and I live in a universe where 99% of people don't feel they have it, they don't go in with that determination, then I'm going to succeed. I mean, I may not succeed exactly as I think I will, but I will get to some promised land where I'll be able to emancipate myself.
So what was the first thing you did to try to escape the rat race?
So the way I approached that question was I said to myself, I'm going to build something which I want to sell.
Yeah.
So that was the essence of it. And so from there it was, okay, who is going to buy? Who's going to buy whatever I sell? I had no idea whether it's real estate or tech or whatever. So then I turned up to in the heart of the city to go meet a bunch of people in the money game, in the investment banking game, asset management, private equity, venture capital, and just ask them, what do investors want to buy? What assets do they want to buy? And what are they struggling to get hold of? And one of the silos was real estate, and within real estate, one of the silos was student housing. And that was interesting to me because back then in Toronto, it was very fragmented. Like there weren't any big players. There was an acute shortage of student housing. You had this kind of emerging appetite amongst the people with money to buy student housing real estate. So I'm like, okay, fine. That's what we're going to do. Student housing, real estate, adjacent to large university campuses in southern Ontario. And we're going to build, or I'm going to build, so that I can sell it. And so I already had a buyer in mind, or at least a few buyers. And I was like, okay, now let's go ahead and develop a business plan which is bulletproof. And so I have a mentorship program which involves teaching younger folk how to build a bulletproof business plan for real estate, so a plan which attracts capital as opposed to a plan that people go around trying to sell to attract capital. So how do you build a case so that when you present a document to somebody, the only question is, when can I write the check out for this? How do you do that? What has to happen? And so I basically did that for my first real estate development, $18 million project. I had no experience in development. I had no experience in Canada. The only one person who turned it down was one of the largest developers in the country in Canada. And he said to me, the project is just too small. If you add a zero to everything, I might be interested. But otherwise, it's an amazing project. That's a positive thing. But everybody else I turned up with a document to was like, yeah, sign me up. Yeah, please let me know when I have to get the check, because what you're presenting is kind of pretty bulletproof, and I can see my returns, and I can see this thing is going to do really well.
So $18 million.
18.
Yeah, 1-8. So
Yes.
$18 million. When or how did you raise the funds, and how many people were you doing it with?
2012, raised the funds. The very, very first investors were immediate family and close friends, and then from there, word of mouth. And like I say, what I basically did was to answer the question, what does an investor need to see? In what sequence do they need to see it? With what level of detail and supporting evidence in order for them to say, I need to give you a check right now? And so really, I made my first project investor friendly. The idea was, how do you make a real estate project, or how do you develop one so that investors want it?
How do you do that?
Well, that's something that I cover in the course that I have, but I think the essence of it, and I'm really proud that many of my mentees are actually doing exactly that, which is really, really heartening to see. But the essence of it is empathizing with the investor. What information do they want to see? With what level of detail? And with what supporting evidence? And the correct sequence of that information. So what I often see as a huge mistake in business plans generally is entrepreneurs going out there and telling potential investors what the entrepreneur wants to tell them. And I very, very often stop the conversation straight away with budding entrepreneurs by saying, stop there. Don't take this the wrong way, please. And I'm going to apologize profusely, but I want you to listen from heart to heart, which is that I don't care what you want to tell me. I'm not interested at all. Okay? I'm interested in what I want to know. Okay? And there's a massive difference between the two. One is egocentric, self-centered communication, and one is empathetic communication, it's allocentric. It's about, what does this other person actually want to know?
It's like in any business, when you need to know who your target audience is. Because if you're out there saying, look, we've got all these awards, and the normal property investor doesn't care how many awards we have. The normal property investor wants to know what we can do for them. And knowing your target audience, knowing how to speak to your customer, that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It is. And so I think there's a piece about understanding real estate and the actual business, but there's also an equally important piece about understanding your investor and saying, I'm going to build something for the investor. And in order to do that, the first thing I have to do is to communicate to this investor what this investor wants to know. And I think that's a huge problem in most business plans that are presented to me. And the entrepreneurs, when they get going, typically, I would say it's very rare for an entrepreneur to present a business plan to me and not be stopped by slide number 3. Okay, it's quite rare that they go on beyond that. Because I'm like, look, guys, I've got a half an hour for this or an hour for this. I'm going to now take complete control of this. Here's my question first. Here's the first question. And they go running off to slide number 15. My second question. And they go running back to slide number 6. And then they realize that the way they put this information together isn't really sensible. And then you ask them, okay, how about this? And they go, oh, actually, we didn't even bother thinking about that. We'll come back to you. It's like, okay, so it's half-baked. Yeah, it's half-baked. And I think with real estate, one of the advantages that you have is that there are so few moving parts to this industry. There's few moving parts to the revenue line. There are few moving parts to the cost line. You can't predict 100% what will happen. But holy smokes, can you really forecast with a high degree of accuracy in a way that you cannot do with a fish and chip store or with an accounting practice? Like, you can't predict with a high degree of accuracy. But with the real estate projects, you can predict, God willing, 90, 95% on each of your revenue and cost line with a very high degree of accuracy. And if you can do that and then present to an investor, look, you won't make a loss out of this because of the following reasons. Okay, it was very, very, very hard. You've got them interested. But I think the important point is to be able to understand how to structure the information so that an investor just wants to jump onto you and say, right, I need this.
Your first project, you specifically bought it to sell. Why sell and not hold?
I think the hold would have happened had I not been able to sell, because the cash flows would have allowed for that. But why? Because my investors wanted capital gains. They wanted, to make money quickly. I knew there was an emotional advantage for me if I could deliver returns for them on the first project.
Because they would reinvest with you.
Because they were compelled to reinvest. Because once they're getting 25% a year from my project, which is quite standard, then they don't actually want any more documents. They were like, okay, please don't give me my money back. Can you please reinvest it? And that's been quite a positive thing to have, actually. So raising capital is comfortably the least of my headaches when it comes to a new project. Actually, yeah, because the returns are typically very much there.
So how long did that first project take you?
3 years.
So the investment was $18 million?
Correct.
Including the construction?
Correct.
And you sold it at?
Oh, a lot more than that.
More than 25%?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then what was your second, third, fourth project like? Did you just
more
decide?
Student housing in Southern Ontario, and 2 years ago, made a decision not to do any more student housing projects in Southern Ontario for reasons of economics. Just didn't feel it would kind of made sense, so we're finishing off what we've already started. And last year, began doing debt-free real estate development projects in Athens, in Greece. And that's partly a response to the Muslim community coming up to me and saying, look, your regular projects have regular debt finance. We can't invest in that. Can you not do something which is a bit more Islamic? And initially I was, no, I can't. And then the sheer number that came knocking on my door and saying, look, please have a crack at it. And then I got thinking, and touch wood, we're into our third project in Greece and Athens, debt-free, delivering 20% at least per year equivalent returns to our investors, which is fantastic. Vast majority are Muslim. And it's quite gratifying actually to see lower middle class Muslims benefit from that. Because otherwise their choices are so poor. Their exposure to real estate, which is an amazing asset class to invest in, their choices are actually remarkably minimal. So it's nice for me to be able to say, yeah, you know what, some strong returns for a bunch of investors who otherwise wouldn't have this on their portfolio.
Why Greece?
Because number one, in real estate, I think it's a smart thing to look where others are not. Number two, to look in those markets where there's a chronic shortage. And number three, I like visiting Greece. I like the food. I like the people there. Good, friendly people. Wonderful place to visit. And I'm at a point in life where I don't want to take on any work which I don't enjoy. And so I enjoy visiting Greece. I have a good team there. And why would I not, given the economics as well? There's a supply-demand shortage, and I think the first project that I did was really good, and the second is turning out equally good, and the third are about to start very soon, a student housing project, which will be amazing. I think it's just going to be slap bang adjacent to one of the largest universities in the world, which, again, pointing to that contrarian thing, like people don't know that. One of the largest universities in the world is in southwest Athens. How many people in London know that? Very few. Perfect for me, because I don't want competition.
So, did you get a lot of pushback for Greece? Because, for example, if anything outside the UK is presented to me, I'll be like in two minds, because I don't know the market. Then I have to obviously research the market. But that's maybe because I'm in the industry. Did you get any pushback from other people saying, why Greece? Or was it more like they trusted you and your team?
There's a heavy sense of trust in me because they could see my track record. But there's a second piece which is fundamentally around this, that the deal that we have in Athens for all of our projects in Athens and Greece is that my investors get paid their capital back and their share of the profits before I get even my hotel bill reimbursed. So an investor looks at that and says, okay, I'm going to invest in this project in Athens. I don't know the first thing about it. But I do know that this Saqib chap can't get his money back that he's invested. He can't even get his profits back or his hotel bill paid for until me as an investor has got my money back and my profits out. Well, in that case, this guy is putting his neck on the line, which I'm very comfortable doing because I understand the legal and economic factors there. I understand in a level of detail which there's no way any of my investors has a hope in hell of understanding, which is fine. So they're really trusting not only my track record, but they're trusting the underlying structure of the waterfall, of the deal. So the deal is so the investor puts the money in, there's no debt in this project, investor puts the money in, they're entitled to get the money out and their share of profits before Saqib gets paid even his hotel bill. Now, that ought to give people an awful lot of confidence.
Yeah.
And on top of that, the fact that I've developed so much real estate in any case, must add to it. So it's like quite straightforward, I think.
Which country would you invest in next?
I would invest in a country which would be counterintuitive. So if it wasn't Greece, I'd be looking at a country which was attracting migrants. Australia would be a place, but I think that real estate market has definitely gone through the roof, so may not be that. Macedonia is definitely a prospect.
It's like you're looking into the penny stocks of property.
Sort of. You're looking, yes, but you're looking where there is a massive shortage of real estate already.
Yeah.
Like chronic.
Okay. I want to speak to you about angel investing.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you do quite a bit of.
Yes.
How did you get started in that?
I got started in angel investing because in principle, I didn't want all of my eggs in the real estate basket. Simple as that. So we could invest in angel level businesses or angel level investing in real estate associated businesses, but we choose not to. So it's purely a diversification play away from real estate.
What kind of businesses do you look into?
we're agnostic on sector and agnostic on geography. And the number one focus for me is to make sure that the interests of shareholders and management align. So the deal is very important as opposed to the actual underlying business. And the deal is, if the business does badly, the management must really feel the pinch. And if the business does well, the management must benefit from it. In which case, from a shareholder perspective, I take a lot of comfort from that, because I know that management is going to think much more sharply, much more efficiently, it'll work smarter because its neck is on the line. What I don't ever do is invest in a business where if the business folds, management might lose a few $1,000s, but fundamentally they're fine, not an issue. I actually need to make sure that the CEO of the business that I invest in is losing sleep for weeks if the business is not doing well. And that gives me tremendous comfort, because then I know that the person's full energy and focus is on getting on top of things.
So how do you structure that?
You look at so the first thing I would look for is, it's not even a structuring issue. For me is, how much cash is management and the top brass putting into the business? How much cash, not sweat equity. How many post-tax dollars or euros or pounds did they put in? And I'll give you a great example. I had this business presented to me not long ago last year by one of these MBA whiz kids from the US. And he had 5 people in his senior management team, and he was asking me to invest in his startup business. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I asked him, okay, how much are you investing in this business? And he gave me some piddly number, which actually did nothing for my sense of confidence. So I said, okay, how about you got 4 other people mentioned in your deck, in different roles. How much are they investing in the business? And the guy says, 0. So I said, okay, let me just get this right. You're raising X dollars, and you're saying to me the top 5 people in the business won't put in even 1% of those X dollars. He said, yep. I said, why? Why won't they put their money where their mouth is? And why won't you put your money where your mouth is? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders. So, it made no sense. And so the first thing I want to know is, how much cash is the business's senior management putting into that business, or have they put into that business? If the answer is a big fat 0 or close to, you walk away, end of story. Because if they thought the business was worth investing in, they'd put their own money in. Which is why for every real estate project, the biggest investor, for the last 10 of my projects, the biggest investor has been me. I want to benefit from the upside. I believe in the upside. I want skin in the game. I want to give people, a lot of reassurance that I'm invested. Can you imagine me going up to somebody and saying, look, terrific real estate opportunity here. Come invest in this project, $25 million project, and I'll put in $1,000. And the guy's kind of scratching his head thinking, with such a good opportunity, why aren't you putting your own money in?
What do you look for in a business? Like, what makes a business worth investing in? Because it's obviously not just the management team. There's obviously other factors in it.
So I'm not the smartest person on the block. So I rely more than anything else on the signal that is given when senior management have a lot to lose if the business fails, and a lot to gain if the business as well. So that's my number one thing. Beyond that, as long as I can make common sense out of it, yes, that's my second litmus test. Because, in 99.9% of businesses out there, I don't know the nuances. I don't know the subtleties. I don't know the ins and outs. Okay, every business has its own curveballs and its own sophistications. It's pointless me pretending to know them. So I just say, look, I haven't got the faintest idea, but I'll take comfort from the high level sense as to whether this makes sense to me, and then the structure. So another example of a business that I've invested in is a water testing technology specifically for fish farms. Like, I've got no idea. There are 8 billion people on the planet. I must be the 8th billion most learned person on this planet when it comes to that industry. Like, I've got no idea what is water testing in the context of fish farms. But I can at least get my head around that fish farming is rising sharply because people want to eat fish and there isn't enough of it. I can understand when somebody says, well, my technology is better than the next technology out there. I can understand that part of it. I can understand when a management team says, well, we're going to invest close to half of our life savings into this. I go, okay, right, yeah, you know what? That kind of makes sense to me. You're putting a lot of money of your own. I get the high level picture. I get the reality that your product is better than what's already out there. Okay, I'm interested. So I don't pretend to be an expert. I kind of leave that to the experts. But I will take signals from whether an entrepreneur backs his or her or their own business.
What kind of returns do you get?
For real estate, for our investors, we don't get less than 20% per year.
For angel investing?
For angel, that's very, very variable. So we've had, in a portfolio of 25, we've had 2 losses, one complete wipeout of $25,000, which is our smallest investment to date. And that was really because of government legislation change in the United States. So we completely lost all of our money there. And there's by the way, I never invest third-party capital in the venture investing. It's all my own. And we've had one situation where we've lost close to half of our capital, but in other situations we've gone, times 50. So the range is very spectacular. It's anything from times 50 to losing all of our money. Having said that, we've only had 2 out of 25 in our portfolio which have gone south. Okay. Everything else is either pretty much at the value that it was when we invested in, or it's up.
So would you ever do the debt-free model you have for real estate into angel investing? Or is it too risky?
So with the investments that I make in angel investing companies, I don't dictate to them what they should do, because I'm not an expert. If they come to me for suggestions and advice, I'm happy to share my thoughts with the caveat that I'm not an expert. And so if they think the smart thing to do is to raise debt finance, it's really difficult for me to put my foot down and say no, because it's like, you guys are senior management, you guys know this ship, you know what the consequences are. I'm a small shareholder. It's not my position to tell you what to do or what not to do. And so I don't get involved in that. Having said that, I can put my foot down on the projects that we're doing in Athens and say, look, we're just not doing any debt. We're just not playing games. There's no lease. There's no funny stuff. It's 100% cash equity. Keep it really simple. And that much I can do. So stuff that I control, I can choose at the outset to say there will be no debt to it. But stuff that's way beyond my control, how can a 1% shareholder or a 5% shareholder exercise that right and deny a CEO the right to kind of approach a bank for a loan?
What kind of advice would you give to someone who's looking to escape the rat race, escape the 9 to 5, but they're just stuck in a rut? So what kind of advice would you give to them?
Firstly, is recognize that they're semi-enslaved. The last Prophet ﷺ did not work for a big fat organization as an anonymous cog. He lived a life, okay? And you're almost incumbent on living life, and you're not going to be able to pull that off by being this tiny cog in a wheel. Number 2, my default is to suggest real estate because I believe it. I believe that it has few moving parts. You can manage the risks, you can forecast your revenues and costs, and you can make an awful lot of capital, awful lot of wealth very easily. The only other industry that I know of that has as few moving parts as does real estate is shipping. But you need an awful lot of capital to start off with shipping. Shipping you can predict with a high degree of accuracy as well. Real estate you can predict with a high degree of accuracy. You can control or influence or mitigate nearly all the parts that are involved. You can do a real estate project. You can actually do a development project, and by the time the very first bricks are in the ground, you can have eliminated all risk. All risk. You literally can eliminate all risk. And so I definitely encourage people to think about real estate as a way out, and I think it's important that people live their lives. And to me, I kind of now feel that I've embodied what I said to you, because I don't treat real estate as a passion project. I have fun doing it. I work with some very interesting people. I choose who I work with. There are no nauseous people, so it's a lot of fun working with them, but I have never been remotely interested in reading a book on real estate. I've been to 2 conferences in 12 years in my life on real estate. One to check it out, and one because I was forced to go. Okay, I would never speak at one because they're boring as hell. But I use the industry as a mechanism to be able to live my life on my terms. So the stuff that I do beyond real estate is only possible because I have much greater control over my life, and that means doing, all sorts of crazy things, from learning Farsi to reading books to writing books. Let's face it. How many 50-year-old entrepreneurs do you know who've written a book on Islam, or strategy, or democracy? Not that they're the best sellers of all time, but at least it gives me the privilege to do that. And so I would say, if you are experiencing rat race symptoms, recognize the enslavement, and think about real estate as a possible option to escape. It's very doable. It's definitely doable. I don't know of any major failures in real estate development, except people who have taken on too much of a project. People who I know who have failed in real estate have essentially bitten off more they can chew. So they've started a project, and 6 months later they're doing another one, despite not really knowing how to do the first one. But if you do one project at a time and you really apply yourself and you energize, there's nothing like it. And the thing about real estate, it's not difficult to understand. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. If I can do it, trust me, most people can comfortably do it. It's not a difficult thing to understand. It's actually a bit like Lego. So there's an awful lot of similarity with Lego. Once you know the basics on your first project, doing a project 5 times the size of the first one is just simply, there's no real, it's not more complicated. And so now we're doing a 30-story tower in downtown Toronto, which if you asked me 10 years ago, I'd have said, no, can't do. But it's remarkably easy. The process and the steps and the thinking, remarkably similar to the first project that I did 12 years ago. But you don't realize it because you think, oh, you know what, it'd be really difficult. It's not. So I'm a big fan of real estate, not because I love the industry, but because I genuinely believe that you can escape the rat race using it, and you can work with people who are fun to work with and have a great time making a lot of money without taking on huge risks.
How does someone learn about real estate then? Because I've not really read a book which is about real estate as well. I don't really go to the networking events about property.
So this is just it. So you aren't the first person to ask me this question, which is why we began a bunch of courses on real estate, which are available online, and they are focused more on debt-free real estate. And I have not found any meaningful courses out there on real estate development. And so we put together stuff that we're proud of. And the feedback has been quite fantastic. So there's that option. The second option I would flag, if you didn't want to take our courses, is to actually just do a small project yourself. Take one small project, find a mentor who's done a few, touch base with that mentor once every couple of weeks, once a month. This is what I'm doing. What do you think? Next up, what do you think? It's not hard. It's not like you have to do a postgraduate degree in chemical engineering. This is really simple stuff. So if you don't want to take on the courses that we've got going, you've got the option of doing a small project yourself. I'm not aware of any courses myself that provide the kind of practical knowledge, both the theory of real estate, but also the kind of emotional journey that you have to go through, and how to manage those risks, and how to manage the capital raise, and how to go about doing. I'm not aware of any kind of courses that I can refer people to, which is part of the reason we put ours together.
How much does your course cost?
So we have 2 courses. One is called the Debt Free Academy. It's $795. It's an online course with plenty of human interaction, plenty of direct mentorship by me as well over a 3-month period. And there's another course which is called The Real Deal, where I handhold a very small number of people over the course of 12 months to shadow me on a actual real estate development project so they can see it unfold. And then I teach them practically everything I know about the steps involved. And that's much more rigorous. It's much more, I mean, the idea behind that is that each person on that course must start their development project during that 12 months. That's really my goal. And that's a $20,000 project. Sorry, $20,000 course. It's not inexpensive. But the value from that, if you can just step back a moment and say, look, your MBA kids spent $250,000 over 2 years so that they can go out and make an awful lot more money. Well, if you're spending $20,000 over the course of a year and you actually, understand how to develop your own real estate, that's a powerful learning. Like, you make a lot of money in real estate development very, very quickly.
For me, I think one of the best ways to learn is either shadowing someone on a project or doing a project yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's when you find out the small nitty-gritty stuff which you won't necessarily get taught in a course. And it's the same with like uni and work. Once you find a job, you learn actually how the real world is, rather than going through uni, doing a course and doing a degree in accounting and then becoming an accountant. It's two completely different things. So doing a job or doing a project is probably the best way to learn, for me anyway.
I agree.
And that's how I've learned.
No, I totally agree. Shadowing somebody or actually doing it yourself, there's nothing like it. And sometimes what you learn is that there's not a lot to it, which in itself is a learning, because it's like this kind of black box that you kind of are absolutely scared of. You pull the lid on it and you think, oh, actually, it's really that simple? And so I remember this conversation with some of my mentees we had with the architect to one of our projects in Athens. And they were like, afterwards, after that 1 hour conversation with the architect, one of the mentees said, well, that was quite simple. And I said, what were you expecting? He said, I didn't know, I have no idea. I mean, and it kind of got me thinking that there are various elements to this which are unknown to people who've never done it before. And simply knowing what's sophisticated in that or what's pedestrian easy, that in itself is like, yeah, you know what? That's nice to know. And so, yeah, I'm actually quite proud of what we've done there, because I haven't come across any realistic courses that are able to communicate and handhold people on a real life journey of developing real estate.
Just a few more questions before we finish.
Mm-hmm.
What legacy do you want to leave behind?
The legacy I want to leave behind is to encourage and motivate Muslim people in particular to live their life, to not be constrained and restrained by mental frameworks which are imposed on them. Like, to recognize that you have one life, it may go at any time, learn to live it and stop shadow boxing and caging yourself up in false prisons. Like, that would be it. I think more than anything else, this kind of can-do approach and this respect for life, which I think gets swallowed up in the rat race.
Do you think it's as simple as having a can-do approach? Because sometimes I do think that. Sometimes it's just about flicking the mindset and saying, yes, I can do it. And that opens a whole world of different possibilities. Because as soon as you say, I can't do it, it just closes your mind off. But do you think it's as simple as that?
For most people, it's as simple as that. I can see a case where if somebody has some specific challenges in life, then those challenges can really interfere. Physical challenges, mental challenges, for sure. But for most people, I still remain of the view that if the determination is there, the drive is there, the rest will fall into place. It's really a question of having the resilience and saying, right, I don't really care if that's a problem. I'm going to go problem solve it. I don't care if that's the problem. I'll navigate it, or I'll have to pivot slightly. But I'll get there. And with that attitude, if failure is not an option, then I've just not seen too many instances of people failing if the determination was there.
Okay, interesting. I quite agree with that. Because I think a lot of the time it's just a mindset shift, which then creates the willpower and the determination to kind of plow through. If you had a Saqib Qureshi next to you just before he's accepted his investment banking job after uni, what would you say to him?
After uni, I would say, you know what? There are not that many steps in my career that I have looked back with regret. So, and maybe I'm being a bit naive and rose-tinted about it, but my experience in an investment bank taught me about finance. My experience in doing a PhD taught me about thinking, and it actually taught me about doing, because my tutor insisted that I couldn't do my PhD in less than 4 years. I did it in 2.5. My experience at McKinsey was fantastic in terms of learning all sorts of aspects about business and communication. And my experience in Dubai was where I got given a lot of responsibility and told to get stuff done. So speed of execution was really important. So I've walked away from each experience having learned something and having been framed by that and having kind of been chiseled away. And I don't really think I'd have gotten to the point of where I am now without those experiences. So it's very hard for me to look back and say, I should have done things differently. I don't really think there's anything that strikes me as majorly different. I think the biggest professional regret that I've had is when I have not given a particular task or job 110%. And so that's something that I would shout and scream at a 20-year-old Saqib and say, you turn up to work on a Monday morning, you got to give 110%, because if you don't, you're actually hurting yourself, you're hurting your employer, and you're hurting your relationship. And there have been times where I've been quite demotivated, quite upset for a few weeks at a time, even a couple of months at a time, and I've not given my 100%. And that's something that I would look back on and say, yes, Saqib, don't deny yourself, don't hurt your relationship with your team or your boss, and don't, ignore the fact that your employer is paying for your salary. Give it 110%, because in doing that, you actually become better. You actually improve by giving your emotional all. And so if you are in a rat race kind of a job where you aren't giving that 110%, you are actually hurting yourself in a way that's not particularly obvious to you until maybe later down the road. Because if you're not giving 110%, you ain't growing as fast. If you're not growing as fast, it's you who's not growing as fast.
Again, that's a mindset thing, because a lot of people, and I know a lot of people that do this, say, well, I'm not going to give 100%, I'll give 50% at my job because I'm doing work for him. But then not realizing if they give 110% and they become the best possible for themselves or for their employer, they're benefiting them more than anyone else. Because then they will take the skills.
Yeah.
Eventually when they leave, they will take the skills, like you said, you learn finance at investment banking, you learn doing and thinking at the PhD because you applied yourself.
Yeah. So my biggest regret, really, it's overwhelming that at times I have not given 100% or 110%, and I've got and that's something that even to this day, in some cases, 20 years on, I still regret. I still look back and think, yeah, you know what, that wasn't good. That was not good. I could have done better, and it does pinch me. But generally, the broader strategic direction of my career, I feel incredibly blessed and grateful for it. I think God has been incredibly, incredibly kind to the point that it's just embarrassing sometimes.
Just before we finish, we'll have a quick fire round. Nothing too strenuous.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite food?
Grilled chicken.
Favorite holiday destination?
Disney World.
I thought you would say Greece.
No.
Favorite book?
Discourses of World Politics.
That's one no one's mentioned on this podcast. And you're the, 47th episode. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Managing time. Controlling time.
Like you stop time for yourself.
Dr. What's that character? Doctor Strange.
And favorite day of the week?
I don't really have one anymore because I kind of work whenever I want to work.
The right answer is Monday, but we'll let you off on that. Saqib, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Good.
And hope to see you again soon.
Inshallah, God willing.
Inshallah.